Who was the worst teacher you ever had? Probably my 10th grade geometry teacher. She openly admitted to the class that she hated teaching math. That she'd gone to college and gotten a degree in English but was stuck with teaching math instead. Etc. One person in that class got an A. 2 people got B's. A few got C's. And everyone else either barely passed or failed. She'd also mark your test answers wrong if you misspelled a word. Even if you got the actual F-king problem right. I had to go to summer school, where the guy who was normally our pay teacher taught geometry. And I F-king aced it. I couldn't believe how easily it made sense to me when he taught it to me. I had a professor in grad school that seemed to have forgotten that the point of teaching a class was to in fact teach. Not just belittle the students in it. If you asked him a question, he'd tell you to Google the answer because it was below him to answer it. We weren't allowed to work together on homework because he didn't believe in that. He got especially frustrated during class because we weren't performing at his level. He would throw whiteboard erasers or pens. He told us to buy one textbook, then only assigned homework out of a different book, which we were allowed to check out from him for 24 hours. 4 of us. 1 textbook. Engineering students. Frequently only had 48 to do the assignment. Would frequently go on rants about how terrible education was here and how he was a much better student than we are. There was no learning in that class. Just survival. There was no learning in that class. Just survival. As an engineering student, I feel like this applies to the whole degree. Survive now. Rememorize later. My sister had a 6th grade teacher who was the mother of one of my sister's classmates. This girl was somewhat popular. So anyway, for my sister's birthday she was having a girls only party on a Friday. She gave out the invites and she was very excited. Friday rolls around and nobody shows up. On Monday morning my sister has to go to school and face everyone, which is pretty traumatic in and of itself, so my sister was feeling shitty. During morning lineup this teacher comes up to my sister and tells her, in front of everyone, "You know why nobody went to your party? Because I threw my daughter a party on the same day and I made sure nobody told you about it." But why? What could a grown adult woman with a job and kids possibly get out of ruining 12-year-old's birthday? I'm always of the mind that people that do bad things usually have their reasons, but this woman sounds like she was literally being evil for the sake of it. This is why people commit school shootings. That teacher wasn't actually a teacher. I had a friend, we were about 6-7 years old, who had just found out that her parents were getting a divorce and was pretty upset. She spent a tiny part of her morning break crying, but after being comforted by her friends she was pretty relaxed for the rest of the day. About 4 hours after finding out that my friend was crying in the playground, while we were all doing classwork, my teacher knelt down beside my friend's table, quietly said to my friend, "Leave your issues at home." Of course my friend started crying again. Wouldn't it be sad if the teacher actually said "don't leave your tissues at home" and was just misunderstood all of these years? I had a teacher in high school that was absolutely crazy. She once went on a rant about 9/11. She said, "I knew it. I told him it would happen." Of course we ask who? Bush. I told him. They will be attack. I call him up and say to be careful. They will attack your buildings. And he did not listen. So I call him back the next day and say, "See, I told you so. It was the Al-Qaeda. I knew it and you never listened to me." We were in Quebec. She would also do debates between 2 students and whoever picked the side that she disagreed with automatically failed. I picked the right side in her eyes, so she gave me about 80 pages of articles and gave my opponent an article about how they were wrong. Good times. Edit. This was in an English secondary school and she was my French teacher. The quote was written exactly how she said it, which kind of added to the insanity. Well, my 4th grade teacher never learned how to spell my name, even though it's only 6 letters. My 6th grade teacher threw chairs at kids. So, I had a German teacher in high school. Hairlip, yes. Hairlip. who really liked to remind his students that he had a PhD. I was in his class with my friend. We were both total shts. And we liked to see how often we could get him off topic. He loved the sound of his voice so much that he never caught on. We could ask him the dumbest questions about literally anything and he would drone on about it while we sat back and let our eyes glaze over. One day we decided to see if we could waste the entire class period. And we did it with one question. Can you explain what your dissertation was about? Proudest moment in high school. One of my computer science profs. English wasn't his first language. He spoke it well enough to understand. As long as he kept to his script. He was one of those profs who just read slides word for word and said nothing else. But he was obviously using slides someone else made. Sometimes he didn't know a word. Or couldn't pronounce it. If someone asked him to clarify, he had absolutely no idea. Like he wasn't even comprehending the words coming out of his mouth. He would either just try to reread the slide verbatim or say I'll check into that later. It very quickly became one of those I'll just buy the textbook and study extra hard instead of wasting my time with ISHT classes. That would be Dick. His first name was Richard but he went by Dick. Of course everyone called him MR. Insert last name here. But I thought Dick was a very suitable name for him. Dick liked to call on people in class to answer problems and then ridicule them when they got them wrong. I was terrible at math and had asked for help numerous times. And he basically always brushed me off. He was a F-king Dick all the time. But one time in particular stuck out. I remember he called on me to answer a question and I had actually been working it out on a piece of paper and I told him actually I'm working it out, give me a second. He stands there for all of 2-3 seconds silently and just makes the standard buzzer sound ER. Josh. Let me ask you something. Do you like being laughed at? I just kind of sat there like no? And he just shakes his head and goes well that's too bad. Ugh, my 4th grade teacher MRS. Roden. Super religious lady who played favorites, and not subtly, with her students and I was definitely not one of them. She told my mom that I would never amount to anything and the idea of me going to college was a pipe dream. She sent the majority of her non-favorites to summer school that year. She got fired about 4 years after I left her class after tons of parent complaints and I'm graduating in May with my BA. Suck it, Roden. I had a science teacher when I was in community college that was god-awful. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and always wore a bra that made her boobs look like a boomerang. She didn't know anyone's name, except for maybe a guy I think she had a crush on, and was horrible at explaining things when people were confused. Whenever you asked questions, she made you feel like an incompetent moron and would give you a condescending reply. Once we had to move the lab tables to make room for an experiment. So we had to move our backpacks to the wall. I was waiting for someone to move and she looks at me and yells at the top of her F-king lungs. Hey lady. Lady. Yeah you. Put your backpack against the wall. I just stared at her with a "are you F-king kidding me" look and everything got quiet and awkward for a few minutes. I moved my stuff and she huffed. It doesn't take a genius to listen to simple directions. Everyone gave her horrible teacher evaluations. I had this catty art teacher who used to say things to me like, wow, this is really gaudy. But you know, in a good way. Garish almost. Like for crying out loud. I might be more than half your age. But I still read. I know gaudy and garish aren't compliments. My home ec teacher made up a few words. Shackability. Spaghetti dollabies. Sipific. She also asked a Korean kid if he spoke Asian. And on top of that, when my friend fainted, she did everything you weren't supposed to do. Luckily my friend's mother is a nurse and was in the other room. Came in and took over. That teacher was a mothfka for sure. Racist and stupid. Oh boy. Mr. Smith. He taught IT and had serious anger issues. That combined with a class of troublemakers lead to him walking out about once per week. Eventually he'd calm the class down and get to work. He'd focus on getting the troublemakers to do their work so the rest of the class who wanted to learn tea never had any help if they needed it. He once locked the whole class in the room after school, illegal, because someone stole a hole puncher. After about 20 minutes the guy who stole it put it back on his desk saying okay fine. Here it is. Jesus, and he exploded. I'm not Jesus, I'm Mr. Smith. I used to have this teacher in 6th grade that would always try and be that hip teacher dude. The one guy everyone could relate to and want to be. Well, one day him some black student are in an argument debate about something pointless. The kid is losing. So he just straight out says, "At least I'm not some middle-aged creep of a teacher." To which the teacher didn't hesitate to respond, "At least I'm not a insert word here." Wow, I can't believe he called him a nipple. I was in English class, 5th grade, and my friend was struggling to write anything into his daily journal entry. Our student teacher got flustered and yelled, "Just write about your dad." My friend immediately broke down and our teacher walked over with frustration. The teacher remained adamant that he could just write about what he did with his dad yesterday. My friend's dad committed suicide the month before. Edit. My friend's mom told all of his teachers about his father's passing. The teacher forgot about what happened and surprisingly did not remember when this occurred. Would think that a teacher would make a mental note of the student's situation in order to avoid an incident like this. She was my Spanish teacher for a semester. I was an A Spanish student before her class. Failed her class. And then an A student again once I was with a new teacher. Meanwhile, the dumbucks in that class still managed C's and B's. I'm convinced I looked like her ex or something. In high school I had a chemistry teacher that treated everyone like they were 3-yo kids. Under some circumstances I had shitload of absence, so I had to pass a test during summer to get promoted to next class. Went to her to get the general idea on what should I learn to get the test passed. She told me it's going to be about basic chemistry plus acids and bases. I specifically asked if there will be anything about fats. She said no. I come to test and there greets me other chemistry teacher. Saying mine couldn't come, but she passed her my test questions. 90% fats questions. I passed it though. Since I presume she was a f-king bitch and learned those too. Senior year in college right now. Currently have a micro professor who told my buddy not to associate with me because he has potential and I bring him down. I have better grades than my friend. I have a 3.5 GPA. I have a scholarship to the university. Pulled her aside after class today and told her how dare she talk shitty about me behind me back. She stumbled and fumbled through sentences. Didn't apologize. And told me she would address my concerns at a later time. She has no idea I'm sitting down with the Dean of Students department head and have proof of her doing this. Can't wait to see her face. Edit. Making the phone call, getting a meeting set up today. The real update should be sometime next week. I'll make a post and tag everyone who shows interest in it. I promise. College professor who you literally could not understand one f-king word she said. She taught economics. It was horrible. Luckily enough I was able to drop the course before I lost my money. Economics. I was able to drop the course before I lost my money. What if that was her lesson all along? My advanced statistics professor in grad school would literally try to teach himself the material the night before our class. He'd just give us giant packets of SPSS output and spend the rest of class going on and on about his own research. Which, and surprisingly, was not analyzed using any advanced statistical methods. He was also absurdly sexist. FCK, I hated that guy. I had a teacher in 6th grade that constantly picked on me for being unorganized. One day when I couldn't find an assignment that was due, he came over and spent a half hour pulling everything out of my desk and showing it to the class. It was super embarrassing. Ugh, teachers like these are the worst. Punishing something with public shaming. Just feeding bullies material to use. Absolutely disgusting. This was a sub. She would only acknowledge half the class by screaming at us while telling the other half of the class that they were her favorites and treating them normally. Her favorites were allowed to ask questions, answer questions, and use the bathroom before everyone else. She threw our food away if we talked while eating lunch. By the end of the day, half the class were too terrified to say anything. My English teacher in 10th grade, who also taught yearbook. She was an absolute space case. She was constantly forgetting things. If you turned in your assignment and she ended up losing it, which happened often, she would claim that it was never turned in and give you a 0. I also received back more than one assignment that reeked of cat pee. Oh. And almost forgot. Our big assignment for the semester was to write an autobiography which had to be like 10 chapters or so. You would have to meet with her one-on-one and she would read each chapter to herself and you just had to sit there and wait and then you would discuss afterwards. By far the creepiest interactions I have ever had with a teacher. My current history teacher. Class with him is basically him going on a rant for 20 minutes about whatever is bothering him that day. And whatever we did that annoys him, which is mostly stuff like how our desks are seated and how we had the PC up when he entered the room. We use PCs in every class. But he doesn't believe in it, so in his classes it's not allowed. He then continues to tell us to just read some random pages. And if we do have any questions for him he doesn't know, so he just tells us to Google it. And obviously that has to be done after class because no Googling in his class. His classes are basically a waste of time. I can read fine on my own without hearing a 20-min plus rant. My 6th grade science teacher made me cry. She was a bitch in general, but one day she called on me to answer a question and when I didn't know the answer, she berated me. I don't recall exactly what she said, but I cried. She took me to her office and began lecturing me, asking me don't I call on everyone in class? Or something or other that had little meaning to me, especially at the time. She switched to 8th grade science 2 years later. And I thanked the good Lord Almighty that I didn't end up having her as a teacher again. My social studies teacher in 8th grade. She seemed very fond of making sure the rest of the class had a chance to make fun of me. My 2nd year chemistry teacher in college. He had spent the last 8 years teaching graduate level chemistry. It was his last semester teaching, so not only did he give 0 FCKS, but he was also incapable of dumbing things down for us. A girl once asked him to explain something conceptually along the lines of why does A plus B equals E? He literally just looked at her for a few seconds and said because A plus B equals E. Did a lot of self-teaching that semester. I had a teacher in 6th grade who accused me multiple times of being a racist. The reasons why. I made a project about 9/11 where I wrote that Osama bin Laden was one of the key suspects. She told me I'm not allowed to say that since he was a Muslim and other Muslims in my school might find that offensive. I hanged out with the new kids in our class who happened to be from Iraq. This automatically makes me a bully. Instead I should avoid them like everyone else. I also pronounced their names wrong apparently. Yet I actually asked them before how they pronounce it. And finally I mispronounced Bosnia-Herzegovina, which was the last nail in the coffin. I had a really bad substitute teacher in 6th grade for a few days. He didn't teach anything. Just made us read the textbook in class. Whenever anyone would ask a question, his reply was look it up in a dictionary. You can't really fault a substitute teacher if the regular teacher didn't leave any plans. And the sub has no background in the subject. He can't be expected to teach everything like a regular teacher. That being said, though, that guy sounds extraordinarily lazy. This will get buried. But when I was young, I had a kindergarten teacher who made my friend with severe, life-threatening peanut allergies make a bird feeder by smearing a pine cone with peanut butter and rolling it in birdseed. She didn't understand how this would possibly be a problem because the kid wasn't actually eating the peanut butter. Poor guy had to get an EpiPen in the thigh. There was the science teacher who gave you extra credit for bringing him Coke, the drink, and tackled one of the students when they got in a fight. The social studies teacher who showed us uncensored Holocaust footage in 6th grade. The other science teacher who was so high every day she would fall asleep standing up mid-sentence. The time we had a collaboration between classes to do a Vietnam reenactment. And that's just middle school. I have more of these. The time we had a collaboration between classes to do a Vietnam reenactment. Had a 7th grade history teacher that got mad at me for something I can't remember. Took my textbook away and kept it all year. I couldn't do the homework. I couldn't study. And I failed. She gave me my book back at the end of the year after I got a final grade of a 48.